different fairy tales, like Little Red Riding Hood, um, Hans the Hedgehog, and various different versions of Sleeping Beauty. And we noticed a peculiar common theme across all of them. The protagonists were or became beautiful. Little Red Riding Hood is explicitly said to be pretty. All of the versions of Sleeping Beauty said that she was a beautiful woman or girl or princess. Hans the Hedgehog may have started off as a monstrosity, but by the end of the story, he was turned into a human, a light-skinned one, and a very handsome one at that. The various descriptions for good princesses always revolved around her beauty, piety, and kindness, and descriptions for princes and kings also noted their looks and their virtuousness and how they were either witty or they were good at getting what they wanted. On the other hand, evil characters like witches and hard stepmothers would generally be ugly. This idea of beauty being equated with more worth and being better or good is not some antiquated idea. It is very much alive and it permeates throughout society. Today, concepts like halo effect and pretty privilege are terms that are used to convey these ideas. The halo effect is when we think someone is or something is good in one way, so we automatically assume that they're good in other ways. An example of this is pretty privilege. So in this context, people who are like, oh, that person is pretty, they usually assume that they have more talents or they're good or better than others. However, there was a movie that was created that shattered this mentality, and it was called Shrek. What is Shrek? So it was released on May 18th, 2001, which is around like 24 years ago, 25 years ago almost. It grossed $492 million and received awards like the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature and more. Following its smashing success, there were 6 more Shrek movies released. 5 more Shrek movies released, with 1 more on the way for next year. Why did people like Shrek so much? So there are a couple factors. It was not a typical fairy tale. It was a fun twist on classic tropes. And the characters were pretty unique. The male lead, Shrek, was obviously not good looking. Objectively, he's ugly. Plus, he's a prickly and grumpy, and he wants to be left alone. He doesn't want anyone in the swamp. He's living his best life by himself, acting intimidating to protect his peaceful roaming life. And then we are introduced also to Fiona, who is an objectively pretty princess who was locked in her tower and is looking for Prince Charming to save her. She is under a curse that causes her to turn into an ogre after sunset, looking sort of like Shrek, but prettier, I guess. She wishes to marry a human prince, namely the Farquaad, to save herself from this curse and remain a permanently pretty young woman, not a human woman. And by the end of the movie, instead of Shrek transforming into a beautiful prince, like in Hans the Hedgehog, Fiona turns into ogre instead and does not marry Gordon. Donkey was Shrek's self-proclaimed bestie, loud, obnoxious, and very outgoing. He was the exact opposite of what Shrek was. He wasn't like a wise sage that followed Shrek along and gave him like emotional. Well, he did give him emotional, but gave him like sage advice in a serious manner. His primary function was comedic relief, but Donkey was loyal. In other fairy tales like Trusty John, fairy tale by the Grimm brothers, the loyal friend or servant would be wise and offer good advice in a solemn manner, sort of like the turtle from Kung Fu Panda. and they would really be sort of like serious. But on the other hand, Donkey delivered his message with candor and humor, which is the opposite of what the typical fairy tale trope expects. Our final character is Lord Farquaad. Despite being the prince that Fiona thinks she needs, he's sort of really far from being an ideal prince. First off, he's short and really weird, and manipulative, and he doesn't love Fiona at all. He needs her. He needs her just simply because he wants to look like a good king. And despite the usual trope of kings being kind and virtuous, Farquaad fits none of these cookie cutter ideas. Our first introduction to him is sort of when he is trying to eat the poor cookie and saying "Run, run, gingerbread man." So yeah, he's not spoiled for it. Um, another contributing factor to Shrek's success is the plots. So in 4 quick steps, the plot is Shrek's swamp is invaded by fairy tale creatures because Farquaad has been banishing from his kingdom. Shrek and Donkey go to meet Farquaad to get these out of his swamp, but to get his wish fulfilled, Shrek has to go save Fiona so that Farquaad can marry her. During his quest, Fiona and Shrek fall in love. They have a misunderstanding arc because of Fiona's curse and the actions that and some of the phrases she said. Because of it, misunderstanding arc. The conclusion is that after Shrek drops Fiona off, he figures, oh, I actually do like her. I can't let go of her, blah, blah, blah. And he goes to crash Fiona and Farquaad's wedding. Now, Fiona is at a crossroads. Does she take Farquaad's hand? Does she become human? Does she go with Shrek, who she loves? And in the end, the couple gets their happy ending, and Fiona, after sharing a kiss to Shrek, turns into an ogre permanently. To fit the classic fairy tale, Shrek probably should have turned it into a handsy demon. He didn't. Or Fiona could have found someone who was better than Farquaad and Shrek, like a good-looking actual Prince Charming who really cared about her and, I don't know, was white. But it didn't happen. The trope of pretty equals good was completely subverted when Fiona turned into an ogress. And so, why does Shrek's message matter now? So even after 20 years, 24, 25 years from Shrek's release, we are still being fed a story after story about how being prettier is better. There is a toxic culture surrounding ugliness and surrounding prettiness. Ugly characters are still portrayed as evil. Regarding the toxic culture, because I'm Korean American, I'm most familiar with Korean beauty standards rather than American ones. In especially K entertainment industry, there's this idea that being thinner means being prettier. Very contrary to Shrek, where both Shrek and Fiona in their ogre forms, they're not overweight, but they're not thin. Well, Shrek was anyways, they're not thin. And so it's just simply by that standard, they'd sort of be ugly. The culture equates thinness with beauty, and in an effort to reach the standard, there's a lot of strict dieting, extreme dieting. A lot of idols especially are really overweight, like unhealthily overweight. And this mentality really permeates throughout the culture. A common compliment to hear from like an older Korean lady when you see them, like your auntie or an uncle that I might see, is, oh my gosh, you've lost the weight, you're so pretty now. Or, oh, your face, it's the size of my fist, you're so cute. And this is like what? But that's like the beauty standard, the culture that surrounds this. So it's no wonder that there is a toxic side to it. Um, in my opinion, American culture does a better job about beauty standards. It's not perfect. There's still toxic things about it. Um, and yeah, but in media too, ugly characters are still often portrayed as evil. Uh, even though we have this trend of movies repainting villains as better, there are still other stories being told where the villain is ugly or is disfigured or like malformed in some way. And the rise of plastic surgery and Botox, I'm not saying that doing these things is bad. I'm saying that some of it stems from this idea that, oh, aging means that I'm not pretty anymore, so I'm going to get Botox to straighten out my wrinkles. Or in Korea, plastic surgery, especially double eyelids, are very common, and plastic surgery for jaw to get the Korean V jaw shape, that's what they call it, to meet the beauty standard is quite common. And this comes from the idea that, oh, I need to fit this sort of mold to be pretty in society's eyes. But Shrek's message was completely different. Shrek's message was that beauty doesn't equal thinness or betterness. It's the character of the person that creates their metal. So Farquaad, he's pretty much a douchebag, and was a clear foil from the ogre Shrek, whose personality, even though it was prickly, he had a lot of character development, and he was kind at Thor, and that's why he was good. He was ugly but good. The ugly person didn't become beautiful. The prince didn't get the girl, and Shrek showed that didn't matter. Society's expectations aren't up at least raised, and that's why Shrek